Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Chris Fair. I'm the president of Resonance Consultancy, based out of Vancouver, Canada. And our firm specializes in advising cities and destinations around the world on tourism, real estate, and economic development. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Laura Citron, the CEO of London & Partners. Laura?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Citron, CEO of London & Partners, and we're the agency responsible for inward investment, trade, tourism, and events in London, the capital of the UK.
So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about the role that world cities play in the innovation economy and some of our research around the key factors that attract talent, tourism, investment to cities today. And I'm delighted to have Laura here to join in the discussion and share some of her experience from her perspective in London as a world city. And then we'll have a dialogue and a Q&A a little bit around some of the trends that we see moving forward. So first off, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on what it is to be a world city. At Resonance, we've been studying the factors that attract talent, tourism, and startups to cities around the world for more than 8 years. And we've been producing our results in World's Best Cities Rankings report each year that companies, destinations, and cities use to evaluate their performance. So how do we think about and benchmark these cities in terms of their performance? We're really looking and have identified 24 factors that have a correlation with these outcomes. So we're not measuring or looking at the perception of cities, but really the underlying characteristics. You can think about it almost like an iceberg. We can see the tip of it is the perception, but what we want to understand are what are the forces and factors underneath what we can see above the surface that are shaping and driving that perception and performance. So we group these 24 factors into 6 different categories. I'm going to go through those quite briefly, and then we'll share the results for the top 10 cities in our index and ranking. So we think about place and quality of place in a city, in these world cities, is really driven by a number of different factors, whether that's weather or safety. If you were here in a session earlier, you heard from Tim talking about from the Times Square Alliance and how unsafe places can repel people away. We also look at sites and landmarks. We look at parks and outdoor activities. So really, this is the character of the environment of the city. The next section we look at and benchmark in our city rankings really is around what we call product. These are the institutions and infrastructure within the city, whether that's museums, whether it's airports in terms of their global connectivity, whether it's the quality of their universities and educational institutions. The third category we look at is what we call programming. And if you think about product as the hardware of a city, you can think about programming as the software within that city. These are the experiences, whether it's shopping, culture, culinary experiences in terms of restaurants, or nightlife. The fourth area that we look at within the rankings is around people. And this is quite a critical piece when we think about the innovation economy and forming startups. It really comes down to the talent. And so here we look at the educational attainment of the population. And we're also increasingly, this is becoming an issue, looking at labor force participation. What percentage of that city's population is participating within the workforce? The next question we ask and look at, which has an obvious correlation with some of the economic performance of a city, is really measures around the prosperity of a city. So we're looking at employment, looking at standard of living, looking at the number of Fortune 500 headquarters within a city. We're also looking at and monitoring income inequality in terms of how shared is that prosperity within a city. And the last section we look at that has some of the highest correlations with attracting talent and tourism is the promotion of the city. And here we're using non-traditional sources, looking in Google, Facebook, Instagram, TripAdvisor, for the number of mentions or ratings of a city within each of these different social media channels. So in aggregate, we can take and score these 24 factors. As I said, we've been monitoring these for 8 years, and we can start to see changes over time in terms of some cities rising up, some cities rising down or falling down. But there's been consistently one city at the top, and I bet you can guess which one that is based on my guest here today. But quickly we'll play this short video, and you'll see the results of the top 10 cities for 2023 within our rankings. So as you can see, London is the #1 best city in our ranking and has been since we started indexing these cities in 2016. I'm delighted to have Laura here and to get into a conversation about what's next for World Cities. But before we do that, I asked her to put together a little presentation around her background and the role that London and Partners plays in the economy of London. Laura?
Thank you so much, Chris. And it's such a privilege to be here at this first City-Tech event in Tokyo. And it's a double honor to be awarded the best city in the world. So thank you very much to Chris and to the organizers for inviting me. So as Chris mentioned, I'm going to briefly introduce London and Partners, my organization, and also give you a bit of insight into London as a city for startups and tech. And then we'll talk a bit about the future of global cities. So London and Partners is the trade, investment, and tourism agency for London. And we are owned partly by the Mayor of London and partly by London businesses. So we are a mayoral agency. And our mission is to create economic growth that is resilient and sustainable and inclusive. And we do that by supporting high-growth tech companies in London to expand internationally and international businesses to come to London. And we'll talk more about those startup relationships soon. And we also bring visitors and events into our city. So we think about London from different perspectives, both business and consumer. So I'm delighted that, as I said, Chris has named London the top city in the world, and I wanted to share a little bit of insight on London's key strengths as a city for startups and technology. London's tech ecosystem is now worth over $1 trillion, and it is only the third ecosystem in the world to have passed $1 trillion. And these are some of the factors that we think has been part of that journey. Connectivity, by that I mean a time zone where we can work in Europe and Asia, great airport connections and rail connections direct to Europe, English language. Customers, this was one of the factors that you mentioned, more global and European HQs than anywhere else. Capital. For startup entrepreneurs, London is a fantastic place to raise funds. It is the fourth city globally for venture capital investment, running at about $20 billion a year of VC investment. Lifestyle and culture we'll come back to. Has anyone here visited London before? Did you have a good time? Yes, I hope so. So it's a fantastic, vibrant city, and I think, like Tokyo, there's always something new and exciting to discover: food, culture, hospitality, events. Ecosystem is about how we support startups to grow, and we have a rich network of incubators, accelerators, supportive regulation to make it as easy as possible to grow a startup and be successful. And finally, talent. London is home to 4 of the top 40 universities in the world, 160,000 international students, and a population of 9 million people, which is very small compared to Tokyo, but very big in Europe. And London was not always a startup city. This has been a real journey for us. And we've gone from having a startup ecosystem 10 years ago that was worth about $650 billion to $1 trillion in 10 years. And so I'm really excited to be part of this movement in Tokyo as Tokyo becomes a startup city, and to see what the opportunities are for London and Tokyo to collaborate. But don't listen to me anymore talking about London. Here are some more interesting people to tell you about it.
London is one of the most vibrant cities in the world.
There's a fantastic tech community, there's a diversity of people, there's investors, all of the pieces are here.
London is this extraordinary asset for itself of all the talent here.
London supports new ways of thinking. That's what innovation needs.
London's role has really been around being at the heart of core regulation that is opening the doors to new business opportunities that will change consumers' lives.
The most exciting thing about the future of AI is the potential to give us back time.
Here you can meet all the great, amazing AI researchers.
Look forward to a bright future with you.
You have these brilliant ideas with brilliant people. In the health space, we have huge opportunities.
We're specifically working on cancer detection using deep learning, and we've gotten a lot of support in London from the government to really deploy our technology throughout the UK.
We want people who know the field of gene therapy, and there are many people who are trained in world-class universities who have that level of talent.
London has an incredible talent diversity. When we have 20 nationalities in our companies, surely we're going to have games that are very creative and appeal to everyone in the world.
We started in East London, which became Tech City, with nothing but a credit card and a bit of a crazy dream.
If you want to be a global business, you need to have a diverse global team. London is the best place in the world to be able to build that diverse team.
Technology is booming. There's a great ecosystem of other startups and tech businesses that really hold each other's hands to help them grow together.
Everybody wants to be here, everybody wants to work here.
The future that can be built here is so great that it can shine as a beacon of the rest of the world.
So I was here yesterday morning when Governor Koike was setting out her vision for Tokyo as a startup city. And as part of that, the importance of Japanese startups to grow internationally. And I very much hope that Tokyo startups, and I hope there are some founders in the room today, will think about expanding to London. And we are here and ready to support you every single step of the way in that journey. From how you grow and expand, getting the right advice, building a great team, meeting investors and clients, and having peers around you that support you. And here's a little bit more information on how we would like to be part of the growth of Tokyo Startup City by supporting businesses here to become global players.
London & Partners is the international trade, investment and promotion agency for London. Since 2011, we have helped over 2,500 overseas companies set up or expand here with our free support, advice and access to London's business ecosystem. So what can we do for your business? We're here to help shape your growth and expansion strategy, find the right location for your new London office, and help you build a dynamic team and culture. London & Partners will introduce you to a supportive ecosystem by providing opportunities to meet clients and investors and facilitating specialist advice from our networks and our partners. With our help, your business can be part of a city that offers global connections, with an internationally renowned reputation in tech and finance, and an open, diverse and cosmopolitan culture, giving you access to a world-class talent pool. To find out more and get in touch, please visit our website, business.london/services.
And in the last 10 years, we've supported over 100 Japanese companies to expand to London, and I hope that some of you will be the next. So that was the practical conversation, and now we move on to the more philosophical part, which we'll be picking up with Chris, about global cities. And for us in London, COVID fundamentally changed our understanding of the foundations of our prosperity as a city. Because what we learned is how closely connected everything is and how experience is at the heart of London's strength as a global city. And by experience, I mean, how does it feel to be in London? How do I feel when I take the underground train, or I walk down the street, or I go to an event, or I go to a business meeting? How does it make me feel? And what we've learned is that when London has an amazing experience, the best people in the world want to be there to live and to grow their careers and to start their businesses. And we attract the best students to our universities and the best talent. And they create fantastic innovation, which drives investment and trade and grows businesses. And that brings capital with it, which we then reinvest in experience. But what we learned during the pandemic was how important visitors, tourists are, because it is the tourists that enable us to have incredible experiences because they subsidize those experiences. And when we had no international visitors, we learned that when you have no visitors, you have no theatre, and you have no bars, and you have no amazing shops. And then somehow the experience is not so great, and people won't want to come anymore. And so we've learned that this is a very delicate ecosystem, and that tourism is not, we would call in English, the icing on the cake. It's not the nice to have. It's very fundamental to our prosperity as a city. Now, people often ask me at events like this, what's the competition that you're worried about? Who are the biggest competitor cities for London? Is it Tokyo? Is it New York? Is it Paris? No. Is it Singapore? No. Is it Dubai? No. Because I don't think that the real competition for global cities is other cities. The competition for global cities like London and Tokyo is different. It's the internet and slippers. Because our biggest challenge as global cities is how do we get people to be in a specific place? And our biggest competition is the ability for people to stay at home in their slippers on the internet. Why do I need to go out to a restaurant or a bar when I can order delivery at home and watch streaming on my television? Why do I need to travel to a business meeting when I can do everything on Zoom and Teams? Why do I need to go to a conference like this when I can watch it online? Why do I need to go on a holiday when I can wear a headset and have an incredible experience on a headset? And the immersive businesses like Meta and others are investing billions to create incredible virtual experiences where we can all just wear our slippers and never leave our homes. And for me, that's what we need to think about as leaders of global cities. How do we create that which can only happen in a specific place? And that's two things that we can do in global cities: experience and connections. The way I feel, this is my first visit to Tokyo, the way I feel when I was walking down the street in Ginza and in Marunouchi, eating my ramen, seeing the people, going on the subway, that's incredible, and nothing online can recreate that feeling of being here. That's experience. And connections is about the people we can meet by accident and the depth of connection that we can build when we see people in real life. But for cities to be able to provide connections, we need to be open. We need to be porous as societies. We need to be inclusive. We need to use events like this to create opportunities for people to meet, because otherwise being in the same place doesn't necessarily make a connection. So we have to compete with experiences and we have to compete with connection. And underlying both of those is values. What makes our cities special in London and in Tokyo is our values. London has done well in innovation because we have an open mindset, we welcome new people, and we welcome new ideas. And without that, we can't innovate. And the UK and Japan share those values of openness, of democracy, of free speech. And so this is a really exciting time to build this partnership between London and Tokyo based on our ambitions to innovate, but underpinned by our values. And I'm really excited that we can be a part of Tokyo's startup journey. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of the experiential quality of the city, and we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is really talking about innovation and what is the innovation economy. Over the last 25 years, you mentioned Meta or Google or Facebook, all of these digital companies have kind of become synonymous with innovation, but the innovation economy is so much more multifaceted than that. What are the sectors that you think are important as you're focusing on economic development for London, and have they changed at all in the last few years, pre and post-pandemic?
So the innovation sectors that are strongest for London are where London had traditional strengths, and then we've intersected that with technology. So fintech is very strong because London had been for many years a global financial center, and then we added technology. Life sciences is very strong because, again, we have a long history in the medical field, and we've been able to add technology. The creative industries, particularly film and TV production, gaming, immersive realities, fashion technologies, again, are areas where London had existing strength, and then innovation has come and really accelerated the growth of those sectors. And now, I think the two places that we're seeing really exciting growth are in clean and green technologies, which is everything from building construction technology to autonomous vehicles, and everything around how we develop more sustainably. And more broadly, impact. A lot of entrepreneurs in London are very mission-driven, very purpose-driven, and we're seeing that more and more of the startups that are created are addressing sustainable development goals. And we saw last year that 10% of all the venture capital funds in London went to impact businesses. 10%, and I would expect that to be growing.
So as it relates to attracting these businesses, I mean, you talked about some of the factors as it relates to connectivity, culture, the experiential quality of the city. Obviously, a lot of these align with the factors that we see in our research and rankings in terms of attracting not only tourists, but talent and corporate investment. What factors are most important now as if we're competing with the internet and we're competing with slippers? What are the things that we need to be focusing on to attract startups to our cities today?
So all of those factors matter. I liked your P's was much better than my list. I'm going to use your P's in future. But I think the biggest challenge for London as an innovation economy, and I would say this probably applies globally, is inclusion. So how do we make our tech sector reflect our society? In the UK, only 2% of venture capital goes to women entrepreneurs. 2%. That is not good enough. And under 1% to ethnic minority entrepreneurs. Now, if you think that in London, over 40% of our population is ethnic minorities, that is very low. We cannot compete if we don't have a tech economy that looks like the rest of our city, which gives everyone opportunities to thrive, because otherwise we're missing out on the innovation of over half of our population. And that is, for me, at the moment, the most fundamental challenge we have and where we need to be really investing our effort.
And no question. I mean, I think we were talking about the importance of diversity prior to the pandemic, but it was probably further down the list, whereas diversity, equity, inclusion within the innovation economy has really risen to the top in many of the cities around the world that we deal with today. As you think about these so-called superstar cities, places like Tokyo, we're sitting in the largest urban economy in the world, or London, New York, these cities have done very well over the last 25 years. In fact, by 2019, there were just 50 cities accounted for 20% of the entire global economy. And we saw that just 26 of those were capturing 75% of all venture capital investment. Of course, here comes the COVID, and we see people leaving some of these cities, companies may be leaving, people working remotely. As you mentioned, they could all be working through Zoom. What do you think the future looks like for these global capitals, so-called superstar cities? Are they going to continue to maintain the same share of the global economy? Will it go down? Will it increase? And how does this distribution of economic activity look a decade from now?
It's a great question. So we're seeing overall that globalization is slowing down at the moment. We see falling investment flows, falling trade flows, rising barriers to entry, rising trade barriers, and lots of onshoring where businesses are bringing their supply chains back into their home markets or close markets. And in that context, I think we will see global functions being consolidated into a smaller number of, as you call them, superstar cities. So I feel that for the tier one cities like Tokyo and London, the future is bright, and I think we should see resilient growth.
It almost seems a bit counterintuitive to think about as the pace of globalization slows or retreats, that some of these global capitals like Tokyo, London, and New York would actually grow and enhance their position. I think a lot of the narrative today is much more about flight from these cities, but the numbers don't actually back that up. We're starting to see rents going back up, people coming back into the cities, whether it's Tokyo, London, or New York, or Paris. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of the narrative around the importance of these global capitals actually rising, not falling in the next 10 years. As it relates to the future and powering startups, innovation economy, you talked about it in your ecosystem, really the importance of students. And I think that often gets overlooked. We look at investment attraction, trying to attract the Googles or the Facebooks or high-end manufacturing, clean tech, et cetera. But if we're looking at this long term, students lead to talent, talent leads to investment, as you outlined in your diagram. What's important in terms of that linkage, or what should world cities be doing as it relates to investing in education and attracting students to power that ecosystem?
You're absolutely right. London has benefited so much from our very large international student population. I think we have more international students than any other city in the world, but I'll check. And it makes a difference because businesses invest in London because they want to hire the students. But the students are also hugely innovative. And all the time when I meet London startup companies, I'll meet a company and one of the founders is Romanian and the other one is Israeli, and they met at Imperial College. Or one of the founders is American and one of the founders is Japanese, and they met at the LSE. And so our innovation base is global because our student population is global. And that has made a really big difference, I think, to having a startup ecosystem that was born global.
So as you think about, we would call these universities sort of anchor institutions. Did that happen strategically in London, or just by chance that they're embedded into the city? Typically in many cities, those anchor institutions are off on a hill or outside on a campus somewhere. They're separated from the central business district or a lot of the business activity. How do you think we should be thinking about the integration of those anchor institutions within our economy, within our business districts?
You're absolutely right. Universities are some of the most important anchor institutions in London, and many of them are very old, and they have been in our city centre for over 100 years, sometimes several hundred years. So they're part of the fabric of the city. But they're also leading the growth of the city as we regenerate new areas. So in our Olympic Park, and I say this as Tokyo, a recent Olympic host, in our Olympic Park, we are creating a whole large new innovation district anchored by two of our universities, University College London, UCL, which is putting a big campus there, and the London College of Fashion, which is the #1 fashion university in the world, is moving its entire university to that site in the Olympic Park. And then to the west of London, we have seen Imperial College, which is our science and technology university, anchoring a major new life sciences development in the west of the city, actually in partnership with Mitsui Fudosan, a major Japanese investor who has been so important to the development of life sciences in London.
What do you think the role then of, we talk a lot about the importance of physical place in terms of offices, return to office being less important now if we can zoom into a meeting. But it strikes me that in the innovation economy, and if we think about these anchor institutions, that innovation requires physical place and space. Are there trends you're seeing, within London in terms of how space is used or the types of space that a world city needs? Is it less Class A office and more innovation district, like you mentioned?
So innovation district is great. We have lots of lovely offices in London. The thing which we need more of in London is labs, wet lab space. So if anyone would like to come to London and build laboratories, you are very welcome, because our life sciences sector is growing very fast, and we cannot build the labs fast enough for the life sciences.
So we have this innovation economy. It requires, startups require talent, education's feeding that. We need space, whether those are labs. We're not necessarily creating everything from our kitchen table over Zoom. What about the visitor economy? And you talked about that in your ecosystem in terms of the role it plays in terms of creating the experiential quality of the city. That's kind of its own loop in your diagram over here versus the other. Are these two separate but overlapping, or are they becoming, those circles becoming closer together in terms of the factors that attract visitors are important to attracting students, talent, and investment?
Absolutely, the factors are the same, because it's about experience. It's about how does the city make me feel. But it also matters because a tourist is often the first way that someone discovers a city. So we know that often somebody will come to London as a visitor, and they'll have a good time, and then they'll come back as a student, or they will come back as a worker, or they will come back as an investor. So tourism is it's the gateway drug to get people hooked, on London. And one of the things we're really thinking about from a visitor perspective is, who is our future visitor, and what will they want to experience in London? And how is that different from the experience that we have today? So how do we need to be evolving the experience of London so that it's ready for the visitors that will come in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And as part of that, we're looking very much at our city centre, and do we have the right retail? Do we have the right food and drink? Do we have the right experiences and culture? And so one of the things I'm doing here in Tokyo is meeting Japanese retailers and hospitality brands to invite them to come and set up in London, because Tokyo has the best retail in the world, the best. And we want to see more Japanese brands in London, because we know that that would really enhance the experience of London, and it would attract more visitors in the future.
It strikes me that a lot of the narrative has been around replacing lost economic activity in our central business districts with more residents. But that could take years, decades. That being the city as a destination And that visitor economy is more important than ever before, not only in terms of creating those experiences that will attract companies, but also replacing some of maybe the economic activity that's been displaced into outer areas. As you think about world cities 25 years from now, a place like whether it's London or Tokyo or New York, what do you think these global capitals, or what I call superstar cities, look like, or what do you hope they look like? And what are some of the things, the key issues that you think we need to confront in order to get there?
Well, I hope they will be net zero cities. London has committed to being a net zero city by 2030. So on your 25-year horizon, we should all be net zero cities. That's probably the most important challenge for all of our cities. And in London, it's a very old city. So a lot of our buildings are 150 and more years old. Most of our residential buildings are more than 100 years old. And so there is a huge challenge to retrofit those buildings to be energy efficient. So I hope it will be a net zero city. I hope that our cities will be more inclusive and less unequal than they are today, because I would be surprised if there are any of your fantastic top 10 cities that would say that they don't have a problem with inequality. And so we need to get better at creating growth that is shared and having economies that are inclusive and that create jobs for everybody and quality jobs for everybody. Beyond that, who knows? Will we have flying taxis? Probably. Will all of our deliveries be made by robots? Possibly. But I hope that we will have cities that are green and cities that are inclusive.
Yeah, I think you hit on really the two key issues confronting us, not in the next 25 years, but today, are around inclusivity and equity, which also ties into the availability of housing for a diverse population, of how we confront that. And the second piece, which is maybe even harder, as insurmountable as the housing gap is the energy transition, of literally rewiring our cities, that we have these global commitments to be net zero, but we haven't yet figured out the how in terms of the tech and the technology that will be required. And once we figure that out, of actually installing that into literally billions of square feet of built environments and built space. I think, maybe one last question to close us out here. As you think about London and your time here in Tokyo, what do you think that you'll take back from Tokyo that you could apply in London as a world city?
Oh, so much. So one of the main things I was really keen to learn from in Tokyo is the city placemaking strategy, the urban placemaking, because Tokyo uses its urban built environment in a very different way to London. And there's a lot that we could learn. As I said, you have fantastic retail and food and drink and hospitality here. And one of the first things I've been really looking at is how Tokyo is a much more vertical city than London. So here you have retail and hospitality going up and up and up. In London, we only usually have it on the ground floor. And so you have a much more dense way of using the space. And I think that's really interesting and really exciting for us to think about.
And how do you adapt in a city like London with the built heritage that exists in terms of that verticality and that density of growing up? Is that possible in a city like London?
I don't know. London is always having this tension between preserving our heritage and our history, which is so important to who we are and to the experience. If you walked around London and it was all modern towers, it wouldn't be London and it wouldn't be a good experience. The beautiful old architecture and our heritage is a massive part. But it's that balance between the heritage and innovation. And what London has done for 1,000 years is go through these cycles of reinvention. And every generation of Londoners has reinvented the city and has made choices about what to preserve and what to destroy. And I mean that both in terms of the built environment, what do we preserve, what do we destroy and rebuild, but also in our society. What do we preserve because it is good and it's helping us? But what in our society do we need to change because it's holding us back? And it's that ability to constantly reinvent ourselves that has made London so resilient as a global city, and why I think we will continue to be resilient, because we're able to adapt and get that balance between what we need to keep and what we need to change.
I think that's a great point in terms of there will be some things that we'll have to let go of in order to move into the future that we want, and that doesn't just involve heritage, but also systems, within governments. Maybe as a last kind of question would just be around that ecosystem and the relationship between your organization and the city as a whole. How does that work, and does that relationship need to change or evolve as the city does?
Yeah, great question. So London and Partners is a public-private entity. So we are partly owned and funded by the Mayor of London, and partly owned and funded by London businesses. And we operate as what we call a social enterprise. So we have some of our funding comes from taxpayers, and some of it we have to earn, partners and sponsors and commercial ventures. And I think that's a healthy tension. It's a healthy balance, because it means we are accountable to Londoners, and we are held accountable by the London Assembly, which is our democratically elected governance for our city. But we also have to keep with the market, and that makes us innovative, because if what we're doing isn't valued by London businesses, they won't pay for it. And so it's a useful discipline for us. So I think that at the moment we're in a healthy tension.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. I'm probably going to spend another half hour talking about the past and the future of world cities. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session, and please thank Laura for sharing her insights all the way from London here in Tokyo.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, everyone.